Civilization in dress. In every country, the respectability of a person is determined, to a certain extent, by the nature of the dress he wears. As our village folk in Bengal say in their patois, how can a gentleman be distinguished from one of low birth unless his income is known? And not only income, unless it is seen how one dresses oneself, how can it be known if one is a gentleman? This is the same all over the world, more or less. In Bengal, no gentleman can walk in the streets with only a loincloth on, while in other parts of India, no one goes out of doors but with a turban on his head. In the West, the French have all along taken the lead in everything. Their food and their dress are imitated by others. Even now, though different parts of Europe have got different modes of clothes and dress of their own, yet when one earns a good deal of money and becomes a gentleman, he straightway rejects his former native dress and substitutes the French mode in its place. The Dutch farmer, whose native dress somewhat resembles the pyjamas of the Kabulis, the Greek clothed in full skirts, the Rus dressed somewhat after the Tibetan fashion, as soon as they become genteel, they wear French coats and pantaloons. Needless to speak of women, no sooner do they get rich than they must by any means have their dresses made in Paris. England, France, and Germany are now the rich countries in the West, and the dress of the people of these countries, one and all, is made after the French fashion, which is slowly and surely making its way into every part of Europe. The whole of Europe seems to be an imitation of France. However, men's clothes are better made nowadays in London than Paris, so men have them London made and women in the Parisian style. Those who are very rich have their dresses sent from those two places. America enforces an exorbitant tax upon the importation of foreign dresses. Notwithstanding that, the American women must have them from Paris and London. This only the Americans can afford to do, for America is now the chief home of Kubera, the god of wealth. The ancient Aryans used to put on the dhoti and chadar. The Kshatriyas used to wear trousers and long coats when fighting. At other times, they would use only the dhoti and chadar, and they wore the turban. The same custom is still in vogue, except in Bengal, among the people in all parts of India. They are not so particular about the dress for the rest of the body, but they must have a turban for the head. In former times, the same was also the custom for both the man and the woman. In the sculptured figures of the Buddhistic period, the men and the women are seen to wear only a piece of cowpin. Even Lord Buddha's father, though a king, is seen in some sculptures sitting on a throne dressed in the same way. So also the mother only has in addition ornaments on her feet and arms, but they all have turbans. The Buddhist emperor, Dharmashoka, is seen sitting on a drum-shaped seat with only a dhoti on and a chadar round his neck, and looking at damsels performing a dance before him. The dancing girls are very little clothed, having only short pieces of loose material hanging from the waist. But the glory is that the turban is there, and it makes the principal feature of their dress. The high officials of the state who attended the royal court are, however, dressed in excellent trousers and chogas or long coats. When the king Nala was disguised as a charioteer into the service of the king Rituparna, he drove the chariot at such a tremendous speed that the chadar of the king Rituparna was blown away to such a distance that it could not be recovered. And as he had set out to marry or join a swayamvara, he had to do so perchance without a chadar. The dhoti and the chadar are the time-honored dress of the Aryans. Hence, at the time of the performance of any religious ceremony, the rule among the Hindus even now is to put on the dhoti and chadar only. The dress of the ancient Greeks and Romans was dhoti and chadar, one broad piece of cloth and another small one made in the form of the toga, from which the word choga is derived. Sometimes they used also a shirt, and at the time of fighting, trousers and coats. The dress of the women was a long and sufficiently broad, square-shaped garment, similar to that formed by sewing two sheets lengthwise, which they slipped over the head and tied round, once under the breast and again round the waist. Then they fastened the upper parts, which were open, over both the arms by means of large pins, in much the same way as the hill tribes of the northern Himalayas still wear their blankets. There was a chadar over this long garment. This dress was very simple and elegant. From the very old days, only the Iranians used shaped dresses. Perhaps they learnt it from the Chinese. The Chinese were the primeval teachers of civilization in dress and other things pertaining to various comforts and luxuries. From time immemorial, the Chinese took their meals at a table, sitting on chairs, with many elaborate auxiliaries, and wore shaped dresses of many varieties coat, cap, trousers, and so on. On conquering Iran, Alexander gave up the old Greek dhoti and chadar and began using trousers. At this, his Greek soldiers became so disaffected towards him that they were on the point of mutiny. But Alexander was not the man to yield, and by the sheer force of his authority, he introduced trousers and coats as a fashion in dress. In a hot climate, the necessity of clothes is not so much felt. A mere kaupin is enough for the purpose of decency. Other clothes serve more as embellishments. In cold countries, as a matter of unavoidable necessity, the people, when uncivilized, clothe themselves with the skins of animals, and when they gradually become civilized, they learn the use of blankets, and by degrees, shaped dresses, such as pantaloons, coats, and so on. Of course, it is impossible in cold countries to display the beauty of ornaments, which have to be worn on the bare body, for if they did so, they would suffer severely from cold. So the fondness for ornaments is transferred to, and is satisfied by, the niceties of dress. As in India, the fashions in ornaments change very often, so in the West, the fashions in dress change every moment. In cold countries, therefore, it is the rule that one should not appear before others without covering oneself from head to foot. In London, a gentleman or a lady cannot go out without conforming himself or herself exactly to what society demands. In the West, it is immodest for a woman to show her feet in society, but at a dance it is not improper to expose the face, shoulders, and upper part of the body to view. In our country, on the other hand, for a woman to show her face is a great shame, hence that rigorous drawing of the veil, but not so the feet. Again, in Rajputana and the Himalayas, they cover the whole body except the waist. In the West, actresses and dancing girls are very thinly covered to attract men. Their dancing often means exposing their limbs in harmonious movements accompanied by music. In our country, the women of gentle birth are not so particular in covering themselves thoroughly, but the dancing girls are entirely covered. In the West, women are always completely clothed in the daytime, so attraction is greater in their being thinly covered. Our women remain in the house most of the time, and much dressing themselves is unusual. So with us, attraction is greater in their fully covering themselves. In Malabar, men and women have only a piece of cloth round their loins. With the Bengalis, it is about the same, and before men, the women scrupulously draw their veils and cover their bodies. In all countries except China, I noticed many queer and mysterious ideas of propriety. In some matters, they are carried too far. In others again, what strikes one as being very incorrect is not felt to be so at all. The Chinese of both sexes are always fully covered from head to foot. The Chinese are the disciples of Confucius, are the disciples of Buddha, and their morality is quite strict and refined. Obscene language, obscene books or pictures, any conduct the least obscene, and the offender is punished then and there. The Christian missionaries translated the Bible into the Chinese tongue. Now in the Bible there are some passages so obscene as to put to shame some of the Puranas of the Hindus. Reading those indecorous passages, the Chinamen were so exasperated against Christianity that they made a point of never allowing the Bible to be circulated in their country. Over and above that, missionary women wearing evening dress and mixing freely with men invited the Chinese to their parties. The simple-minded Chinese were disgusted and raised a cry, saying, "Oh horror! This religion is come to us to ruin our young boys by giving them this Bible to read and making them fall an easy prey to the charms of these half-clothed, wily women." This is why the Chinese are so very indignant with the Christians. Otherwise, the Chinese are very tolerant towards other religions. I hear that the missionaries have now printed an edition leaving out the objectionable parts, but this step has made the Chinese more suspicious than before.